success, certainly in my experience, doesn't happen overnight. There are the lucky few. Success happens through hard work, perseverance, agility, anti-fragility, as we like to call it. And if you're enjoying what you're doing, and if you can stop every few months, look back and say, have I made progress? And if you can see that this progress has been made, keep going. If you aren't making progress, stop, rethink, and try something new.
Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix, your strategic growth partner. At Valentix, we believe that trust and authentic relationships are the only true currency in high-value business. We challenge the status quo by building an AI-powered client acquisition engine that enhances your human connection, helping you move beyond the slow growth of referrals. Our AI-powered systems eliminate the grind, allowing you to break through the noise, build high-value relationships, and free up your time to focus on transformative client impact. If you're ready to build a predictable growth engine, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Dean Van Leeuwen, a strategist, speaker, and CEO of Tomorrow Today Strategy Group, a consultancy that helps leaders navigate disruption, unlock growth, and ignite meaningful change. His work sits at the intersection of strategy, transformation, and future-facing leadership, partnering with organizations to turn bold intent into change that delivers at full potential. Dean, welcome to The Growth Shift.
Hi, David. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you on the show today. You're focused on forward momentum, impact, everything that we love at The Growth Shift and at Valentix. So I'm very excited to have you on the show today, Dean. And your journey began in big banking, right? Including a stint at McKinsey, and you took a fascinating turn from there. Tell us a little bit more about that foundational journey and how things came together and put you in the position you are now.
Yes. I'll probably be giving my age away here. So in my early 30s, I'd worked in financial services. I've worked with big consultancy, and I kind of had, I think I've always been a bit of an explorer. I love looking at things differently. I love being a bit of an adventurer. And I thought, you know what, there has to be more to life than 9 to 5. So I went backpacking around the world. And I'm very passionate about scuba diving and underwater photography. And I found myself on a research vessel, group of scientists researching whales that were migrating down past the Great Barrier Reef. And every day I would find myself swimming with whales. I was living the dream and having an amazing, and one day, enormous shark swam up to me. Yeah, we were in the deep blue. We were hundreds of miles away from any land, and the shark swam up to me, and it came towards me with its mouth wide open, its teeth glistening in the sun. I had an epiphany at that moment. I realized I was not Jacques Cousteau. I wasn't Bear Grylls, and that I was better off seeking adventure from behind a laptop. So I moved to London and started the consultancy Tomorrow Today. And Tomorrow Today, I've always been interested in the future and how the world is changing. I think it's part of my curiosity for the world around us. And Tomorrow Today is all about understanding tomorrow's forces of change, or forces of progress, as I like to call them. But then thinking deeply around what do we need to do today to drive positive change. Because I'm a big believer that the best way to predict the future is to create it. So whilst we are kind of pegged as a futurist consultancy, we work with our clients to really identify these forces of progress, the impact it has on their business and their industry, and then helping them to chart the sort of course forward to create the future that they want to create.
Dean, there's something I'm curious about here. You know, you obviously pursue adventure, right? This is something that you mentioned you did, and that you ended up with an encounter, you know, with a shark, teeth glistening at you. You decided that perhaps the best way, or realized the best way to pursue adventure for you from there was behind a laptop. Where I'm going with this is that a lot of entrepreneurs are adventure seekers, right? They're action takers, maybe adrenaline junkies in some way. But often, they also want to bring that sort of adventure to business to create a larger impact or to have more excitement, whatever the drive is. But it's a very different world, right? Swimming with whales and encountering sharks and sitting behind a laptop trying to find a path to impact and purpose at a desk, right? It seems like there's perhaps a divide between lifestyles, personalities, and things like this. So for somebody who has lived this, who's gone from swimming with whales, encountering sharks, and then finding impact from behind a computer, how did you find perhaps the ability to shift the physical state of actual adventure seeking, with your physical state, let's say, adventuring, traveling the globe, swimming with whales? How did you make that shift to behind a computer in a way that was sustainable and maybe, felt like it aligned properly? Because again, it just seems like there's a big divide between the two, right?
Yeah, no, great question, David. So for me, it's all about enjoyment in what you're doing. I've always said as a founder, entrepreneur, one of the main founders of our business, I've always said to myself, as long as you're enjoying what you're doing, then keep moving forward. If you're not enjoying yourself, then reassess and change the course. But I've loved what I do at Tomorrow Today. We've been around for over 20 years now. In the 2 decades that we've run Tomorrow Today, things have changed dramatically. There's always been challenges. I think every week, every month, I come across a new shark with its teeth glistening at us, and we need to make, metaphorically speaking, sharks, and we need to adjust and we need to change. So I've found it an incredibly exciting journey. And whilst I'm not swimming daily with whales, I still follow my passion, and I take my family scuba diving, and we enjoy those benefits together as a family. But I think it was always about mental stimulation, and whether you're swimming with a whale in an ocean, for me, that's mentally stimulating. And so for me, the big thing with Tomorrow Today is, am I enjoying myself? Am I mentally stimulated? And am I making a difference? Am I having an impact? And I've always felt if you can say yes to those 3 questions, you carry on moving forward.
I love that. So, Dean, you mentioned you're still encountering sharks today, of course, in the metaphorical sense, but encountering sharks, difficult situations, challenges, overcoming them, of course, it leads to a lot of growth, a lot of progress. Tell us, what has been that one most impactful growth shift moment, the most important one that changed your ability or changed how you think and how it is you approach business?
Yeah. So David, the listeners are probably guessing by now that although I live in London, or I live south of London, you're probably guessing from my accent that I come from slightly south of the Thames. So I was born in South Africa, and I moved to the UK, just 25 years ago. And when I started Tomorrow Today, I would, this was back in the sort of early 2000s, and the research even back then was saying the world is changing. And so I would go to CEOs and business leaders, and I would say, this is what the research is showing. And people would nod and they go, I like what you're saying, but we're doing really well. So why bother changing? And then we had the Great Recession. If my memory is correct, it was 2007, 2008, the Great Recession. I suddenly started getting calls from leaders who were saying, Dean, what you were saying 6 months, a year ago now makes a lot of sense. We don't understand this new world. We don't understand this new generation of customers or talent. We don't understand the technology that's emerging. We don't even understand the new breed of competitors that we're starting to see in the new technology. And our business really took off during the recession. And my own personal story was, I now do a lot of keynote speaking. It's one of the key growth drivers of our business. But back in 2006, 2007, it wasn't something I was doing. I was mainly focusing on consulting. And we had a junction sort of point at, with the Great Recession. Things were tough. I have to admit it. We were hand to mouth, and business was we had a great retainer with the insurance giant AXA, and that got cancelled during the recession. And I kind of looked at things and I thought, if I want to stay with this business, I need to start doing keynote presentations and workshops. And that was a huge, kind of shock for me. That was a big gulp that I had to take. I even to this day, public speaking is something that really makes me feel nervous. I really enjoy it, and I love it now, and I love the process and the creative process of coming up with the talks and working with clients and that. But it's not a natural hunting ground for me, and I've had to work really hard at developing my skills and as a speaker, and I think I've done pretty well at doing that. But the reason I'm kind of saying, this was a big shock for me, in that I had to confront my fear there. I had to really push through it. And part of it was necessity. The Great Recession, it would have been, all right, we'll go back to banking if there were any jobs available there or whatever. But for me, Tomorrow Today was a calling. I've always enjoyed what I've done there. I wanted to stick it out. So I pushed through. So then I started doing speaking, and the consulting side of things took a bit of a backseat. And I would often say to clients, you don't need consultants. You employ very bright people. They know their industry. They know their job better than any consultant could. But what you do need is to help connect the dots, help see the bigger picture of how the world is changing. But largely your people can develop the strategies and the plans to get where they need to get that going. So this was another kind of, you want to call them a metaphorical shark. I was doing work with some of the leading business schools. I was lecturing there to executive leaders, and I would present these forces of change and so on, and I would be talking about, 15 years ago, we were talking about autonomous self-driving cars and 3D printers that were printing houses and AI and quantum computing, and I was getting increasingly frustrated that leaders weren't grabbing hold of this incredible technology and really creating a positive change in the world. It was just sort of more business as usual. So I then started thinking, hang on, I've got a young boy. We can see where the world's going. There are a lot of, I call these sort of gray elephants, these big, highly probable, highly visible, high impact, yet largely ignored forces of change out there. And we just, they're elephants in the boardroom. We're ignoring them. We'd rather somebody else dealt with them, and we just carry on with the nuts and the bolts of the business. But we're also moving through a time of incredible opportunity. I kind of shifted my perspective and said, actually, clients do need consulting. They do need the hand holding, or they need to see a broader strategic perspective of how they can imagine different ways of working. So the business pivoted it again at that moment, and we rapidly grew the consulting side of the strategic advice side of the business. So at each point we've had these junction moments with these realizations where we've said, some of them were driven by opportunity, others were driven by necessity, overcoming fear. And we've grabbed these opportunities as we've sensed them, and we've grown and shifted the business. So for me, it's always been an adventure. And nearly 25 years in, Tomorrow Today is still an adventure.
Yeah. Dean, there's an incredible insight that I want to pull out here or dive into a little deeper for the audience, right? That the pivot and the necessity or the change, the pivots and the change, let's say, at times of necessity, right? You've mentioned sharks, you've mentioned the gray elephant. And I think that these gray elephants, the things that are massive opportunities but widely ignored, a lot of people have them in their lives, whether it's personally or whether if it's within business. What I mean here is that, sometimes the biggest areas and opportunities for growth are those things that are obvious but cause anxiety, cause fear, cause stress. They're avoided. But it's a good signal to look at and to say, well, if I'm avoiding this and it's so obvious, it's probably that biggest area for growth, for opportunity, for impact, right? So from your perspective, with what you see in boardrooms of, these gray elephants being ignored, right, or perhaps pushed to the side, what do you think causes that beyond fear and uncertainty or discomfort?
I think we like to do what we feel most comfortable, that we tackle things that we're familiar with, that we know where our strengths can play out. The problem is we're living in a once in a century transformation, and what worked in the past is not a guaranteed recipe for success going forward. So there's a real necessity to constantly reimagine and rethink what it is that you are doing, and to confront, let's say, the elephants in the boardroom, the things that you'd rather not tackle. And these gray elephants are scary. They are big. They are challenging. But I always like to think about, how do you eat an elephant? Have you heard that one, David? How do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. Here we go. I've got loads of these elephant jokes. If you want me to, I can dive into them.
I'm sure you do. But Dean, in your experience, working with companies and executives who have had these gray elephants and they've overcome them, I'm sure there's many reasons people overcome them, and many, let's say, maybe personality traits or key indicators that show that someone or a company will have the ability to tackle it and overcome it. But if you could narrow it down to maybe one of the most important or common personality traits or indicators that someone is in the position to actually tackle that, because I'm sure not everyone does. What do you think is the most important trait or indicator that a company or an organization will actually tackle that gray elephant and make that impact?
Yeah. I think that there are two fundamental traits. So the first one is curiosity. The willingness to look at the world differently, to find the weak signals, and then to evaluate. I think, to be an explorer. We talk a lot about innovation, but I think you want to be an explorer. Innovation comes from identifying the problems that are worth solving. Anyone can come up with lots and lots of good ideas. You can have a brainstorm session over a morning, a day, and come up with loads and loads of great ideas. But the truly successful organizations are the ones, and leaders are the ones who are the best at identifying the most important problems to solve. So you have to be curious. You have to be an explorer to seek out those problems, because often they are gray elephants. They're in the boardroom. They're in our environment, but they're being ignored. And we might not even think of them as problems. Let's take Steve Jobs. He said that he never did any research with customer or any customer research, because customers, he felt, didn't know what it was that they wanted or needed. I mean, if you'd gone to somebody and said, do you want a device that you can put all of your songs onto, all of your CDs, LPs, whatever you want, onto one little device? I mean, people go, why would I want that? I've got my Walkman, I've got my CD, I've got my record player. Why do I need a device that puts everything on? That's impossible anyway. I mean, it's a stupid idea. It's crazy impossible. You can't put all of that music into one little device. Nah. But the problem was you couldn't listen to all of your music on one device, and that's the problem that Steve Jobs identified. And then the iPad, iPhone, or iPod, iPhone, iPad all just became natural extensions of that, solving that one big problem that no one had even thought about or even thought was possible to solve. So curiosity is the one thing. That the next thing I think is constantly being tuned to these forces of change. So I love the term Kairos. It's an ancient Greek term, ancient Greek word, and the ancient Greeks said that there are rare moments in time when you have these sharp transformations. And they said that the leaders who were tuned into change could identify these sharp transformational moments, and they could grab hold of that opportunity to shape the future. And for them, Kairos was a god who had wings. And they said if you were paying attention, if you were prepared, you could see Kairos flying towards you, and you could grab hold of him, and you'd whisk you up, and you'd grab a hold of that opportunity. But if Kairos passed you, you could never regain that opportunity. And I think that's what we see a lot with organizations and leaders, is they're aware of these trends. They sort of know that they're happening, but they're not paying enough attention, or they're too hesitant. They see the opportunity approaching, but they're cautious, they're not curious enough. And then suddenly the opportunity passes and it's never resurfaces. But those leaders who are paying attention to the weak signals, to the trends that are happening around them, this is a wonderful period in history. I often say it's a once in a century transformation. You'd have to go back 100, 120 years to see this level of transformation happening in real time. And you can't see that. You can go back.
Curiosity and being tuned in. So now, Dean, I mean, we have a pretty good high level view at what Tomorrow Today does from what you've shared, but could you maybe share a little bit more about the hands-on day-to-day nitty gritty, maybe even with a story of working with a client, right? When you met an organization or an organization came to you, they had that curiosity, they were tuned in. What did you do with them to actually help them move forwards to, bring tomorrow today, let's say?
Yeah, so we did some work with a large, one of the leading PGM mining companies, and the company's called Sibanye-Stillwater. You can have a look on our website. And the CEO approached us and he said, we've got a good strategy. We're comfortable, we're happy with the strategy, and we believe it's a good one. But he said to me, I've heard about your gray elephants, and I'm worried that maybe we haven't seen everything. Maybe there are challenges, threats, opportunities out there that we haven't properly thought through or identified. So he said, come and talk to my executive team about these grey elephants and let's see where that leads us. We're not coming in to reinvent or redo our strategy. I want you to help us to stress test it. So that's what we did. And we've got what we call a 4E model. And the first E in the model, as you can imagine from what I've been talking about, is about exploring. So you want to explore these grey elephants. You want to imagine what they could mean for your business, for your industry. The second thing you have to do is then evaluate. Evaluate it against your current strategy, the work that you're doing, and your capabilities as well as an organization and leadership team and your values, your culture and all of that. So you evaluate all of these grey elephants, this Kairos moment, what does it mean to your business? And then you've got to embark. And that's crucial for us as a team at Tomorrow Today. We don't want to come up with great strategies that never get implemented. For us, the most important thing is that you actually start to create that future. So we spend a lot of time with leaders actually helping them to think through what's the future they want to create, what's that end game, and then mapping the route to get to that. So what's the journey they're going to take? What are the milestones and steps and that they're going to take along that journey? What are those strategic drivers that are going to get them there? And then it's really important for us that they also not only embark on that journey, but they also elevate their performance. So that's the 4 E's. You explore, you evaluate, you embark, and then you elevate. And we worked with Sibanye-Stillwater, and Neil Fruneman was the CEO there. And we worked with them over a period of 3.5, nearly 4 years, in guiding them on that kind of 3E journey in identifying these grey elephant trends. And one of the key trends, one of the grey elephants we talk about is what we call multipolarity. And it's a shift from a unipolar to a multipolar world where there are a number of power centers as opposed to what we've been familiar with, just one sort of superpower. And that's dramatically changing the world. And as part of our research, we were even able to identify a lot of the aggression before the war in Ukraine. And we did this research for Neil, and we helped him to understand, and his executive, we helped them to understand what multipolarity meant for a team of miners who were in platinum and battery metals. And they saw the opportunities. Again, this is the Kairos moment, sort of flying towards them. And they saw the opportunity because they wanted to be a Western aligned mining organization. And they wanted to assist the States and Europe in processing a lot of the battery metal minerals. So they then actively started pursuing a green metal battery mining and processing minerals strategy. They set up very strong alliances and relationships with both the European and American governments. And Neil said to me in a podcast interview, he said, we were years behind our competitors, but because of the work we did on the grey elephants, it gave them the framework. It helped them to crystallize their strategic thinking. And because of that, they were now years ahead of their competitors in terms of the relationships that they'd struck with the different governments and their positioning in this. And then when the Ukraine, and you start to see what's happening in China around their dominance in rare earth minerals and battery minerals, you can see that Sibanye-Stillwater's strategy and how they implemented it is huge visionary thinking behind that. We were able to help Neil and his team in developing that. But I think for me, the most wonderful thing about what Neil said at the end was that I said to him, Neil, which of the grey elephants are the ones that keep you awake at night? And I remember he paused for a moment, and he had a real long, pregnant pause, and I thought he wasn't going to say anything. And then he said the most wonderful thing. He said, and this was totally unexpected. He said, Dean, none of them, they don't keep me awake anymore. He said, my team of executives, we now talk about dancing with elephants. So we become so tuned to them that we now dance with them. And I thought it was a wonderful analogy of a team that had worked with the grey elephant models, had worked with our strategy frameworks, and had delivered huge success for their shareholders and their business, and that really was now living that strategy. So for me, that was really powerful.
That's incredible. It's extremely impactful, right? And true to the name of your company as well, right? Having the foresight to look at tomorrow and prepare for it or be ready for it, bring it to today to keep yourself ahead, right? To be tuned in with what's changing and how you can continue to progress. That's fantastic, Dean.
Absolutely.
Now, you're having some incredible impact with Tomorrow Today, of course, even if we're just looking at the singular story you just shared with us. One of the primary things that allows consultants and coaches alike to get to that state of being able to have a greater impact is, of course, growth, connecting with more clients, achieving more scale, working with more companies and organizations to have that impact and to bring it forward. If we're looking at client acquisition today, and it's one of those things that most coaches and consultants are focused on for the impact, but for the growth as well. And with growth being the topic of conversation with the show, tell us a little bit more about client acquisition for tomorrow today. You mentioned earlier that you're doing a lot of keynote speaking. Is this what's still working best for you in today's market, or what else is at the top of the list for you?
Yeah, if I was to offer some, guidance to other consultants and coaches, I would highly recommend putting yourself on the speaking circuit. Firstly, for us as an organization, it's been a fantastic revenue stream. We make decent, good money out of speaking gigs. It's also a wonderful window to your marketing window to your organization, because you can reveal a lot of the frameworks, the strategic thinking, the creative thinking that your team has. And I think that, for me, has been a very rewarding part of the keynote speaking. It's just seeing people that aha moment, when the light bulb goes on people, and you connect the dots for people in a talk, and they go, wow, okay, I get this now. So that's been a fantastic way. And it's not, what I like about it, it's not salesy. You're sharing your insights, you're sharing your knowledge. It's a very authentic way of building relationships with people. And for me, consulting, coaching, it's all about relationships. You have to connect with people. You have to invest in that relationship. And when you do, then the business follows. And I think if all you're doing is cold calling and emailing, and our clients are so busy, you have to show them that you're prepared to invest in a relationship, and you have to show them that there's something that's relevant that will help them with their pain points, or help them improve their performance. And it's not easy, but we share a lot of our own IP. We put it out there. It's freely available. We write blogs and white papers and articles, and we spend a lot of time sharing our insights on LinkedIn. And I love that process because it helps me to do a lot of the research that I need to do. It's not, for me, I know it has a positive spin-off from a sales perspective, but it really helps me to push the products that we're creating, or develop the products we're creating, and the thinking behind those products. So it's almost like the marketing we do, the sales that we do, is almost the core sort of foundational elements of many of the products that we sell. So, the grey elephant model came out of COVID, out of the research that we were doing, out of the insights that we were sharing with clients. And suddenly we went, hang on, COVID is a grey elephant. Pandemics were highly visible, they were highly probable, but they were ignored. And we wouldn't have, if we wouldn't have identified that, had it not been for the research that we were doing and the insights that we were just sharing with our clients. So my experience and growth, and where we get our business from, is we get a lot of leads from keynote presentations and at conferences, and people seeing us talk. But then the other part is just that we actively share that knowledge. And maybe that sounds a bit counterproductive, but we give away a lot of that value.
One word you used earlier, that all of this is just circling around, almost like sharks, you could say, in the positive sense of it. It's contribution, right? And this is the key to client acquisition and growth today, is contribution, contributing, not just putting out information, but putting yourself in a position where you're providing so much value to people in your network or currently outside of it, that they're compelled to come to you, right? Whether it's because you're contributing to them, or you're asking for contribution from them and elevating their status, building that relationship, right? Connecting that bridge, or bridging the gap. Contribution, it's where most marketing fails today, right? With these broad blast cold emails or content that looks, sounds, and feels the same as everything else. People are completely missing the mark. So incredible what you're doing today. Very, very sound, sage advice for the audience there. Dean, tomorrow today is, of course, the name of the company. So you're always thinking about tomorrow, right? With what you mentioned, working today for client acquisition and growth, what does tomorrow look like? What is that next stage of evolution when it comes to client acquisition? What are you experimenting with or trying today?
So for me, we've definitely noticed a drop-off in email outreach marketing. We've got a database of around about 25,000 people who have subscribed to our newsletters, and we actively communicate with them once, twice a week. the consistency is important. We have certainly realized that cold emails, if you get a database list and you email people cold, the responses are really, really low, and just doesn't work. We see a lot of success with LinkedIn and putting our content out to LinkedIn. I think there's an audience there of people who are hungry for solutions and answers. But it's a very crowded space. It can be quite a noisy space, and you certainly can't imagine or think that you're going to get any sort of overnight success. And I find I'm always pleasantly surprised with the work and the leads that we get out of LinkedIn, because I never really expect it. But it's not something you can really, I think, plan on or base your business acquisition strategy around. So for me, the real value in what we're doing and what we're testing going into the future is again, how do we give our clients and prospective clients a taster and something that's of real value to their business? And again, I think it's building on that, adding value to people's lives, and they appreciate that, and then they inquire and they want to learn more. So we're developing, we have developed tools that can help clients to really assess their change and their transformation projects. And one of the amazing pieces of research that I've seen recently is that depending on who you read or want to listen to, from McKinsey to Bain, BCG, they all seem to agree that between 70 to 88% of transformation strategies fail to hit their ambitions. So I call that, majority of strategies end up backfiring. And backfiring isn't failure, it's just it doesn't reach its true or its full potential. So we've developed tools that companies can use to assess whether or not strategic initiatives, the likelihood of them backfiring or igniting. And that's relatively new. We've been piloting and testing these tools and this framework and it's been received really well. And we're rolling that out more broadly fairly soon. So, but for me, it's giving clients the tools to help them to really gain extra value in what they are doing. I think you've got to give a little bit to get something back. But also, it's not just. Maybe that sounds a little bit cliched. For me, it's about we really want to have an impact, a really positive impact in the world tomorrow, today. We want to create a better working world, and even if it's just with one client like Sabanya Stillwater, or we've worked with Nomad Foods on their future of fish and their future of plant-based food strategies and things like that. It's about working with clients who can have a real impact and a positive impact at the end of the day. And if that means we give away a little bit more of the value that maybe we could try and commercialize, I think it's worth it, because we want to have an impact at the end of the day. So,
yeah, well, I mean, what we're looking at, what you're doing here with these tools that you're just rolling out, it's a modernized lead magnet, we could say, but a high value one, right? Providing something that will draw people in and provide them with real value. It'll get them so far. Through the value that's created, it's also making them see a problem, right? And who's the logical company to work with who has helped you identify a problem? It's, of course, the company that's helped you identify it, right? So it's incredible. You're not just providing value for the sake of getting something back, but providing value to create a larger impact. And by doing so, you're creating that environment where people want to come back to you to work with on the impact they're pursuing.
Yeah, David, I think, and you're touching on this, it boils down to what's the purpose and what's the value of your organization. Understanding that purpose and living that purpose for us is so paramount. We want to create a better working world. We believe that there are better ways to work, and that there are incredible opportunities at the moment. AI is an incredible tool, and I get frustrated so much with clients and experts in the AI field and the narrative around AI replacing people and replacing jobs. And I just think you're missing the point. If you're going to use AI as a blunt tool for automation, you're missing the real value of AI. And the value is in augmentation. People have powers which AI, I would argue, is never going to replace. Our intuition, our creativity, our empathy, these are traits I can't see AI genuinely replicating. But AI can help us turn those human powers into superhuman powers. And that's the exciting thing.
Absolutely. Dean, let's chat a little bit about AI, of course. This is what a lot of the audience is here for. Beyond what you're doing with advising clients around AI and around tomorrow and all of this, where does AI come into play for tomorrow today, just in terms of maybe it's in the day-to-day, maybe it's turning your team into superheroes, right? Where is it most impactful for you?
So for us, AI is an amplifier. It's not a substitute for judgment or creativity or trusted relationships. It amplifies those. So and it doesn't replace deep strategic thinking. And we believe it really helps us raise the bar. We've been using Gen AI since day one. We heard about the launch of ChatGPT and we grabbed it and we played and we experimented and we fell in love with it. I'm proud to say I'm an AI addict. There isn't a day that goes by that I'm not constantly using it. And our team has, it's helped us to elevate our product. It's helped us to elevate the output and the services that we deliver. So for us, it doesn't replace the strategic thinking, but it certainly helps us to amplify what we are doing. It accelerates research, data development, content generation. We've created AI agents that are analysts and scouts. One of the big tasks is, when I'm talking about how do you ignite change? How do you move from strategies that are backfiring? And again, the backfire is not failure. If a car backfires, you still can get to your destination. It's just consuming too much fuel. It can be noisy. But how do you fine-tune elements of fine-tune key elements of that strategy so you get that pure ignition? And we've created AI agents to help us to scout information about different companies so we can identify if their strategies. And then we've got AI analysts who are analyzing that information from the scouts and then determining whether they sit in the ignition zone or the backfire zone or even the fail zone. Where are they sitting across that spectrum? So I think increasingly we're using AI not just as a way of helping us write content or research, but now also to actively scout and analyze and do work at a much higher level. We're a small boutique consultancy. We're not a McKinsey or a BCG who have thousands of analysts and so on. But AI is helping us to compete on that level because they're trawling all the data. And then you bring the human in the loop, you sense check that information. I love playing the different Gen A tools against one another. So I'll use Chat GPT for one, and then I'll go and sense check it with using Perplexity, and I'll say, Perplexity, test this. And you can identify quite quickly where their hallucinations exist by playing the different tools off against one another. And that's our first pass. And then we bring in the human sort of intuition and creativity. And together we found it's been an incredible tool for amplifying what we do and actually delivering a better end result for our clients.
Now, Dean, you say that you don't think AI will ever be able to replace certain aspects of current modern day human work, or well, I wouldn't say modern day because things are changing so quickly, right? Such as that critical element of human judgment. Right? You also mentioned that you see and you feel a lot of leaders and businesses are thinking about AI incorrectly, right? And looking at it as a tool for subtraction rather than amplification. So when we bring these things together, how would you advise leaders to then leverage AI without compromising the essential human element of judgment and strategic thinking?
For us, it's about reimagination. It's about saying, so one of the stories I really like is around Henry Ford. And Henry Ford didn't invent the automobile. He didn't even invent the production line. All those things existed before he came along. But he looked at it and he reimagined the business models. And he said, how can I use the technology, the advanced technology of the day to reimagine how we work? So the continuous production line was one. The other one, I think, he used the technology and thinking to challenge business models in the way that we worked. And the one I think is less known for is the fact that overnight he doubled his wages, the salary of his workers, and his shareholders were up in arms. How can you double your expense base? And what you're paying your workers. But within 2 years, profits had doubled. And Ford recognized that if he doubled wages, he would create a market who could purchase his cars. He recognized that he would attract the best talent, and the competitors then had to follow by upping their wages, which would then have a positive spin-off and create a bigger market again for his cars. He was prepared to take, there was a risk obviously involved in that as well. Could have not worked out. But today, Henry Ford, that reimagination of that business model, how we pay people, is attributed to creating the American middle class and the mighty economic engine that fuels the consumerism within America is attributed to that decision to change that business model. So for me, what leaders aren't doing enough of today, and we're starting to see it, but it's more about how do we take what we've done in the past, use AI, use robotics to automate what we were doing. Cheaper, faster, maybe better. But it's more about saying, what can we do differently that we've never done before because we have this new technology? I think that's the question that we need to be asking. How do humans and machines work together, collaborate, amplify the end result to use the strengths of each one? And then how do we completely reimagine what it is that we are doing and how we are doing it? And we do see that and I think the companies that crack those questions are the ones that will be the companies of the future. The ones that are just trying to cut costs, cut headcount, try to automate what they're doing today. We see a lot of this in banking and financial services, and that just leads to frustration. It leads to lack of lowering of morale. They're going to become increasingly less relevant, and the people who come along and reimagine, that's what's going to shift, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. This is a once in a century transformation. So the business models that we're going to see in the next decade or two are going to probably shock us. Things that you couldn't even imagine today. Clever people are going to put, like Henry Ford did back then, they're going to put the nuts and the bolts together and they go, wow, that's how we do it. And all of a sudden, it's going to change so quickly. I think there's going to be a young generation of people who are going to grow up and they're going to look at the world and they won't even be able to relate to the world that we grew up in ourselves as kids and as young adults and elderly adults. And
Dean, your story covers strategic foresight, entrepreneurial drive, and the critical importance of creating the future for the founders, the leaders, and the growth-minded listeners who are navigating their own growth shift. What's the single most important piece of advice that you would leave them with about understanding tomorrow's forces of progress and making intentional decisions to shape their desired future?
So the one piece of advice I would say is that success, certainly in my experience, doesn't happen overnight. There are the lucky few. Success happens through hard work, perseverance, agility, anti-fragility, as we like to call it. And if you're enjoying what you're doing, and if you can stop every few months, look back and say, have I made progress? And if you can see that this progress has been made, keep going. If you aren't making progress, stop, rethink, and try something new. Never be afraid to reinvent. I've reinvented myself and the business numerous times over the past 20 years. The one piece of advice I think I would offer your listeners, especially in this age of AI, I would say AI will not replace trusted experts, but it will help a good consultant deliver even higher performance. And that's what I would do, is embrace AI, embrace what we're doing. But it's about the trusted advisor and augmenting AI with the work that you do to deliver higher performance.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights with the audience today. For anyone listening who might like to learn more about Tomorrow Today, what would be the best way to find you?
Head to our website, tomorrowtoday.consulting, or email me at dean@tomorrowtoday.consulting. Love to hear from you.
Thanks again for joining us today on The Growth Shift.
Pleasure, David. Thanks very much for the invite.
Another powerful conversation on The Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on The Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.